Welcome back. By now, you may have noticed that we have some warnings here. We need to deal with these warnings. If varchar columns have got UTF-8 encoded text in them, by default Synapse was the second version of the UTF-8 varchar to apply varchar character, which is not what you would want in order to keep the UTF-8 characters as they are. You should specify that UTF-8 collation. Collation basically specifies the bit patterns that represent each character in a dataset. They also determine the rules that govern the sorting and comparing up with the data. So it's important to specify the right collation for the data so that there are no unwanted character conversions that happen. First, let's find out the default collation for our database, and then I'll show you how to change that for our query as well as for our database in order to find the default collation for our database. You can carry the system database this table, and that will tell you the collation. So as you can see, the collation for our master database and the demo databases that we created is the standard ASCII collation here. It's not the UTF-8 collation. We need to change that to an UTF collation. There are two ways of changing the collation for UTF. The first one is to apply the collation in the with clause and next to our data type names here so that the collation applied just for that column, immaterial of what the collation is for the database, or the second option is to apply the collation for the entire database. So any query you run on the database rhymes with that collation, and you don't need to specify a specific collation for each of the columns. So let's start with the first one, which is to specify the collation in the with clause. Let me copy the select statement from here. And then we can work on that. So in order to specify the collation, you specify the word collate and then you specify the collation you want to specify. I'm going to use this UTF-8 collation for all of these ones. So let's do that. And let's execute this select statement and the warning should now disappear. Let's go to messages. And as you can see, there are no more warnings. And if the columns contain UTF-8 characters in them, they will just be read as UTF-8 characters and there will be no implicit conversion of the data. And that's what we want. So this is the first option. But nowadays, most of the data we're seeing is UTF-8 data. So we can apply the collation at the database level itself. So let's apply that at the database level. In order to do that, you would have to alter the database and then specify the collation. One thing to know is you can't alter the master database because that's managed by Synapse. So you can only alter your databases. That is the databases you've created. We know that we've got a demo database, but I want to create a database for our project here, which is the New York Taxi project, and we'll use that for the later sessions as well. So I'm going to create a new database and then we'll apply the collation for that database. So let's do that. So I've now created the database NYC Taxi Discovery and let's apply the collation for that database. You can either switch to the database using the use command or you can go to the drop down here and then pick up. You're not seeing the NYC Taxi Discovery database here because we haven't refreshed, but if you hit the button here, it'll refresh and then you'll see the new database so you can select from here or you can just run the use statement and then that will now start to use the NYC Taxi Discovery database and it's changed here as well as you can see. And the SQL command to alter the database is alter database and it's the database name and you specify the collation after the keyword collate. Similar to what we did here. And if I just applied. And that's now executed. So let's go back and run our select from the databases to see whether the new database that appears and the collation. So as you can see, we got the New York Taxi Discovery database and the collation is the UTF-8 database. Sorry, the collection is the UTF-8 collation. And now you don't need to specify the collation at the column level. So let me grab this select statement without the collation being specified, and then we'll execute that and see whether we still get warnings. We shouldn't get any warnings because the collation specified at the database level. So as you could see, we got the 3-character varchar columns here and there is no collation being specified, but we are not seeing any warning messages. That's because the collation is not specified at the database level, but the same query if you run against master database, you're going to see those warnings because that database doesn't have the collation being set to the UTF-8 collation. So let me switch to our database. So those are the two ways you can specify the collation. Sorry, you are SQL queries. We've done a lot of work so far without saving our second script, so let's hit publish all and then click publish. To save the changes, I would encourage you to keep saving your changes as you go along rather than waiting for a while. Because if you lose the changes, that won't be nice. So that's the end of this lesson, and I'll see you in the next one.